Hello, neighbor. I hope you don't mind sentimental nostalgia, because here are 5 neighborly things about Mr. Rogers. Number 1, he set a good example. Fred Rogers was a humble person and an ordained Presbyterian minister to boot, so he would almost certainly object to me saying this, but with all due respect, rather than ask what would Jesus do, I think people should ask themselves, what would Mr. Rogers do? Mr. Rogers was kind, he was patient, he was good-humored, and he always treated his audience, mostly young children, with respect. He never condescended, he never patronized, he earned a great deal of trust from his viewers, and he never betrayed it. That's why so many of us who discovered the show in preschool still feel such a strong attachment to the show and to Mr. Rogers himself. Well, that's one reason. There are many others, a few more of which I will share with you now. For instance, number 2, he encouraged curiosity. The world can be a scary and confusing place, especially when you're a kid. Mr. Rogers showed us that often what makes it so scary and confusing is that it's unfamiliar. Segments of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood were devoted to visits to the zoo, or a recycling center, or behind the scenes on the set of The Incredible Hulk, a personal favorite of mine. But there were also segments explaining how to use a public restroom, or what it's like at a restaurant. Mr. Rogers was the ideal guide to take an inquisitive but apprehensive child through the world, because he could make everything, no matter how mundane, seem full of magic and possibility. And that was just when he was showing us the real world. Number 3, he celebrated imagination. How can we reflect on the inexhaustible wellspring of wonderful that was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood without mentioning the neighborhood of make-believe? It's just about perfect. The trolley connecting the ostensibly real world of Mr. Rogers' house to the land of make-believe, carrying us from one location to the other and back, the nonchalant interactions between human characters and puppets, the way the make-believe segments evoked childhood play so accurately. I don't know about you, but my stuffed animals went to school and had jobs and lived in a little community together, just like the citizens of the neighborhood of make-believe. Though, now that I think about it, maybe I got that from Mr. Rogers. But of course, Mr. Rogers didn't excel only when it came to the wondrous or the imaginary. Number 4, he taught hard lessons. Mr. Rogers kept it real. Throughout its 31 seasons, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood dealt with some very serious subjects. Subjects many of the children watching the show had to deal with in their own lives. Mr. Rogers did episodes about death, about divorce, about bullying, about violence his young viewers may have seen on the news. He once famously shared some advice he'd gotten from his mother when he was a child. When something terrible happens and you're feeling sad or scared, look for the helpers. There will always be helpers. And when you see the helpers, you'll know there's hope. Now, I don't know if I should call this last bit neighborly. Maybe that's a little too cutesy. But whatever adjective you choose to attach to it, here's the thing about the Mr. Rogers that we watched on TV all those years. Number 5, he was just being himself. Following the Manchester bombing on May 22nd, writer Anthony Breznican tweeted about an encounter he had back when he was in college. He'd been having a hard time following the death of his grandfather, but had found some comfort in a rerun of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Then one day, he ran into Mr. Rogers on an elevator. Anthony told him he'd watched the show as a child. Mr. Rogers gave him a hug. Then, after they got off the elevator, Anthony told him the show had helped him out recently when he needed it. And Mr. Rogers sat down on a window ledge next to Anthony, a total stranger, and asked him what was wrong. And he listened as Anthony told him about the death of his grandfather. And Mr. Rogers told Anthony about his own grandfather and how he still missed him all these years later. We never stop missing the people we love, Mr. Rogers told him, but they also give us gifts that never go away. You know what really moves me about Anthony Breznican's story? The certainty that there are countless others out there who bumped into Fred Rogers one day and had a similar experience. He didn't play a character on TV. He played himself. He was a decent, gentle human being. And to those of us who grew up as his television neighbors, he gave gifts that we will keep for the rest of our lives. The hardest part's picking only 5. Catch you next time, neighbor. Hey folks, hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks for watching.